Hi everyone, and welcome to my PowerPoint on triage for struggling adolescent readers. And in my PowerPoint, I decided to pull some major quotes and kind of talk about some major ideas that this article had discussed. So to start out, we're going to go with, what about struggling readers? Who are struggling readers and how do we find them? Usually by the time kids get into middle school and high school, we kind of expect them to be excellent readers already. We don't really expect them to be struggling or anything like that. I know sometimes teachers have an attitude that it is only the students who have exceptions or special needs that should be struggling readers. But kids are pretty good at hiding the fact that they can't read. Some kids can make it all the way through high school without having to read. So it's pretty interesting, and it's up to us as teachers to get these students, find them, and really see them, because half the time these kids aren't being seen, they're not being helped, so they're discouraged, they're disappointed in their reading. So one of the first quotes that I have on here is, middle schools and high schools across the country face literacy crisis monumental proportions. So, like I was saying before, so many students can make it all the way to the high school level without actually being able to read. And it's kind of crazy that we can let kids slip this far up. And like I said before too, in my second quote, secondary schools are ill-equipped to help these students become better readers. It's because teachers don't expect students to be poor readers in middle school and high school. There aren't as many intervention programs for reading when kids get up to the high school levels. I know in elementary school there's usually a reading teacher with some kind of intervention. The reading teacher usually pushes into the classroom, pulls students out of the classroom, has set reading groups. Even teachers will have individual reading groups for students to create individualized reading instruction to kind of get them at that level where they need to be. Which leads me to the fact of elementary schools, my second quote, about 75% of students with reading problems in third grade will still have them when they get into high school. By the time students reach third grade, they should be reading at their level or just below their level. If they cannot advance in these levels in third grade, they're probably not going to be able to read all the way up into high school. So it's very important to make sure that teachers are taking the time to work with their students to read in the elementary levels. And this is kind of where the issues fall into making sure that all students are, being taken care of and they're being taught how to properly read. Not all the time do teachers have times where they can individualize instruction, small group instruction. They only have a certain amount of time that they see these students for. So these kids that slip out of the radar or under the radar are the ones that might not be in school all the time. They might bounce from school to school. And another thing that's becoming more prominent that people tend to forget about are our ELLs, our English language learners. Our English language learners also fall into this triage for struggling readers because they come into a whole new language that they've never experienced before. And because they haven't experienced this before, they're really, really struggling with learning how to read. And sometimes the individual instruction that they received from their ESL teacher isn't always enough. So these students also go up through the years without learning how to read. They learn the conversational language, and they don't actually learn how to read. So they make it up through high school without learning how to read, or they enter high school without knowing how to read. And the other thing too about ELLs that people tend to forget is that coming from a student that comes from a third world country, may have never been to school in their entire life. You may get a 6th grader or a 7th grader who has never been in school, so they have no formal education. We call these students SIFE students, or students with interrupted formal education. These students have no idea how to read or write in their native language, which basically is ground zero for an ESL teacher or any other kind of classroom content teacher, because they now have to teach this student how to read and write in English. And it's starting all over again with the students. So, which brings me also to the 4th quote, which is, because of their poor literacy levels, students might also face low self-esteem and anxiety. Students who can't read and are called upon in class will more than likely be the students that act out in class because they don't want to read. When it comes to ELLs, you might get one that's sitting in the back of the classroom, that's kind of shy, doesn't really speak, and the trouble with that is teachers kind of have this guilt for trying to make their ELL read, that they just kind of brush it off and go, oh, it's okay, you are new to this country, you don't have to read. When in reality, teachers should be making their students read, no matter if they're ELL or not, because we need to find out if these students can read or not. It's very important to make sure that we are allowing our students to read and to take time and to, actually show us what they can do. And which is also leads into the 5th quote I have on here, or the first, not even a quote, but the bullet, curriculum standards and achievement tests may make school more difficult for struggling readers. Because as we learned in the first chapter of Tabani, that just because a student fails a test doesn't mean they're dumb. And in the 2nd chapter, just because a student passes a test doesn't mean they're actually smart. Kids learn how to cheat the system for tests. So if a student learns how to take a test and they know how to find the right answers, or to write sentences that, for short answer, that answer the question just barely and they just get the minimum amount of points to pass, they're still cheating the system. They are not actually showing us what they have learned. So it's very important that we pay attention to our students and we really take the time to get to know them so we can find these students. And then on this page, I just have a little more information about struggling readers. So one of the quotes that I pulled from the article was, to establish an effective reading plan, it is useful to create 4 categories of learners with different levels of curriculum, instruction, intensity, and duration. This is one of the most important things alongside with getting to know our students. Getting to know our students is so important in the education world because not every student learns the same. I think this is something that has been, hammered into my brain since day one of my education courses. Not every student learns the same. No longer can teachers stand at the front of the classroom and just lecture. Teachers need to be having different types of strategies, different types of activities, different methods for our students, because not everyone learns the same. One student is not gonna learn the same as the one sitting next to him or her. So it's important that not only do we have these different methods and different strategies and styles, but we also create different intensities of the lessons that we teach, because one student might be a low-level reader, still reading at their grade level, but a low-level reader, and then a person sitting next to them might be a high-achieving student who is reading 2 or 3 grade levels above average. So we have to take into account all of our students, which leads into the second bullet on this page, which is most schools are set up so that it only accommodates average students. There's not very many classes for advanced learners or even struggling learners. So it's important that we take on our students and we take the time to get to know them so we can place them in the right classes and maybe even create new classes for these students to learn. So in the article 2, it talked about some schools that implemented the struggling readers programs. And in the first one, a school, a key, so I'm just going to read it. A key concept of Chipman's model included identifying students at 3 of the categories listed in the chart: benchmark, strategic, and intensive. So this means this school took the time to figure out where their readers were, where their benchmarks were, where they were in their levels, and how they got there, and then created lessons and classes off of this. And then in Pasadena, California, they created a literacy program based on all the components listed in this article, which was actually really interesting. And then a school in Washington, all English and reading intervention teachers went to a specific training and reading academies where they focused on phonemic awareness, phonetics, fluency, and vocabulary and comprehension. These are all important things when it comes to reading, because without any of them, students wouldn't be able to read. And sometimes when kids get up into the upper levels, they are not able to read or to get to the levels that they need to be in. So with that in mind, we have to kind of follow these schools' examples and take the time to figure out, talk with administration, talk with consultant teachers, talk with reading teachers. At the middle school level, some school districts still teach reading. There's still a reading class alongside with English. In the new school district that I am working in, we have our English classes are more writing based, and then we have a separate reading class for students. And 1 period a day is set aside for English teachers to have struggling readers or advanced readers. They literally split the entire 9th grade in half and have intervention classes for students who are struggling readers or advanced readers, and they break it down by level. So groups of students are grouped by their different reading levels, and they're able to work with a teacher and advance their reading levels and get to the levels that they need to be at, which is so important for students. This program has worked well, and it helped with even just in the English classes too, because it's getting the students ready. I know in Tavani it said that reading and writing go hand in hand. They work together, which is very, very important. So what can we do about our students? How can we make a program or a class or something that's really going to help our students? So in this slide, I have adequate training for all teachers, expected to teach the programs, teacher coaching, and ongoing classroom support. Knowledgeable leaders are able to monitor and support instruction, appropriate student placement and scheduling with student-teacher ratios, and time blocks that adhere to appropriate progress monitoring and diagnostic assessments, and regular time to analyze students' assessment data and plan immediate interventions to address both student needs and teacher support needs. This is the ideal setting. This would be the perfect in a utopia setting. This would be the perfect classroom for students to learn how to read. At any grade level, this would be the perfect thing. But as teachers, we know that this isn't really all possible. Well, it is, but it's very difficult. It's a very difficult process, and it takes time, it takes other support, it takes administration support, it takes so much extra that it is almost impossible to do. But as teachers, it's important that we take the time and we look at our students and we find out all the information that we possibly can to get our students where they need to be and to find those struggling readers so we can do something about it, so they don't go through middle school and high school and no one finding out that they can't read until they're a junior in high school. We need to be able to catch these students when they're down in 3rd and 4th grade so that we can do something before they reach high school. So this article was something that was really important, that we should really take a look into and we should really follow. And that's kind of all I have.